Sublesson 5.2, using Windows to reset a password. There are several ways to reset a password in Windows. The first is to do it within the actual programs that are built into Windows within the graphic user interface, or GUI. And we're talking about the control panel and computer management. But we could also do it in the command prompt in text with the netuser command. Also, we could use a reset disk. Now, the reset disk has to be created prior to wanting to reset the password. So we'll show how to create a password disk also. And then, of course, using special means, you might be able to boot off of the Windows disk to help you to change the password, or use a third-party disk or third-party bootable media. You could use USB flash drive also. So let's demonstrate and discuss each of these now. First, I'm going to remote into another Windows 7 computer, and we'll talk about the GUI options first. First thing we're going to do is go to Start, go to Control Panel, and we'll go to User Accounts. That brings up the User Accounts portion of the control panel. And you can see I'm logged on as Lampercles, who is an administrator of this computer, which is important. You need to be an administrator to make changes to other account passwords. This is just a local computer. There's no domains involved. So we just have this one system we're working with, and I am an administrator on the system. But I want to manage another account. Let's say that someone forgot their password. It's my job to reset the password. We'll go to the Manage Another Account link. And then we see a list of the accounts on this system. And the one I want to work with is Test User. That's my test account. We'll click on that. And again, let's say that Test User forgot their password or lost their password. We'd go to the Change the Password link. And then here we would type in the new password, confirm it, and maybe type in a password hint so that the user would have an easier time remembering the password. So that's one way to resolve that problem, or help to resolve that problem. And then just click Change Password. So we'll type in one now. Password hint. Remember the first rule. What is the first rule? Well, this is kind of an interesting hint. One of the rules that most companies will have is that a password should be a certain length, often 8 to 10 characters or more, and in very secure environments, 15 characters. This one's only 5 characters, so we might want to make it something longer, and that's something you want to keep in mind. But I'm just going to leave it as that and change the password now. And I'm doing that so it's something that's easier for me to remember for the future, for the rest of this video. So that's how we can make changes in the control panel. You can also make changes in computer management. If we go to Start, right-click Computer, and go to Manage, that'll bring up the computer management window. And from there, we go to Local Users and Groups, click Users, and we'll see all the users on this computer. One that you will notice that wasn't listed in the control panel is the administrator account. And by default, that's not going to show up. That's the main administrator account. And you'll notice that there's an arrow pointing down, which means it's disabled. We'll get back to that in a moment. The one I want to work with is Test User. If we right-click on that, we can select Set Password, Proceed, and then select the new password from here. So either way you want to do it. Computer management and local users and groups is the more advanced method. And you could do more with the accounts from here. Plus you can see all of the accounts, whether they're disabled or not, including the administrator account. Now, it's a good practice to disable the administrator account and the guest account after you have applied a complex password. You want to use the other administrator account that you create for the system. In this case, for this computer, it's Lampercles. Leave this guy on the shelf and leave him disabled, and leave the guest account disabled as well. And this applies to all versions of Windows. This is a security precaution. So there you have the two ways to reset the password in the GUI within Windows. We can also do this in the command prompt. And to do so, we need to run the command prompt in elevated mode as an administrator. So click on Start, right-click the command prompt here, and go to Run as Administrator. You can also do it from the search field if you wish to. We'll click on that now. Just make sure that you run it as an administrator, and you'll know because the title bar will say administrator : command prompt. And from there, we can modify any user account that we wish as far as our passwords go by using the net user command. We need to know the name of the user, but if we didn't know, we could just type net user and press enter, and that'll give a list of the users on the account. And here we have test-user, and that's what we want to modify. So we'll do the net user command, space, test user, space, and the new password that we want. I'm just going to put test in there, and notice that by default, it's set up as clear text. We're not showing asterisks here. You can actually modify this. It's kind of an in-depth modification in the system, but if you're an administrator, there really shouldn't be anybody looking at your screen anyways. So we'll press enter for that, and it says the command completed successfully. Remember, again, you have to do this as an administrator. If you try it in a regular old command prompt, it will not work. You'll get a system error 5. Now let's talk about creating a reset disk. We're going to go back to the control panel, and we're in the test user screen right here. To get to the place where you create the reset disk, we just go to user accounts, and you'll see the option here. Now, I'm not really too worried about the test user account or other standard users because I, as an administrator, can easily reset the password if necessary. But what about my administrator account? That's what I'm interested in here. That's what I want the reset disk for. Because if I forget this password, and it's an in-depth one, it's complex, then it's going to be very difficult for me. I'm going to have to go back into the system and somehow get in as the main administrator account in order to reset this. Or I'm going to have to recover the password, which we'll talk about later. So we want a reset disk for this account. This is really one of the first things you should do after you set up your system, just in case you forget the password. So we'll click on the link here, create a password reset disk. And really, the word disk is just left over for the old days. D-I-S-K, disk, means floppy disk. And while you could still use a floppy disk, it's unlikely that you'll have a floppy drive on your computer. So nowadays, we use a USB flash drive. I have a flash drive already inserted in the computer, so we'll click Next. And that's the drive. It's called Flashy. And we'll click Next again. And I have to type in the current password for my administrator account. So I'll do that now. And as I said, it's a complex password. We'll click Next. And it says here that there is already a password reset disk for this user account. And that's okay. I don't want to use that anymore. I'm going to create a new key on a new reset disk. So we'll click Yes. It goes ahead and creates the disk now. 100% complete. We'll click Next. And it tells you successfully done it. Label this as a password reset and keep it in a safe place. So if you have an older, smaller USB flash drive, this is the perfect thing to use that drive for. Click Finish. And that has been created. Now, if we want to take a look at that, we'll open the Windows Explorer. And here's my flashy drive. Click on that now. And you'll see the file that's been created is userkey.psw. And that has the hashed version of the password. So if you want to reset the password, you can do so by using this flash drive. Again, you have to do this previous to a problem occurring. You have to have this beforehand. So make this password reset flash drive when you're done setting up your computer. Here I have another Windows 7 computer. This is running in a virtual machine, and this is the logon screen. if we were to go in here and type the password, and we typed it incorrectly and press enter, it'll tell us username or password is incorrect. Now we have the option to reset the password. If we click that link, we would then go through the wizard, insert the flash drive, and that'll allow us to reset the password and get into the system. So it's a great tool to have, but it's something that you have to do in a proactive fashion. You have to do this before the error happens, before you forget your password. So I'll just cancel out of that. And that's how to create a USB flash drive based reset disk. Now, there are some special means as well. In Windows, there are several ways to hack the administrator account and reset the password. This was more common during Windows XP, but it's still possible in newer versions of Windows. It could be done by exploiting the ease of access feature. It might require using a Windows install disk, or by using a Linux live disk. Now, the Linux live disks can be used for good or bad purposes, but I do recommend that you have at least one live CD available in your toolkit. And here's a whole list on Linux.com of live CD distributions. These are all bootable Linux-based operating systems that you can use to fix your system in a variety of ways and also recover passwords. And you have all kinds here: Crunchbang Linux and Clonezilla Live. One that a lot of people like is Knoppix. There's so many versions of this. You know, you really can't go wrong unless you don't build the disk properly. And often you could do this on thumb drives as well, USB flash drives. You could also use third-party disks such as Hiren's Boot CD, and I have that open here. Hiren's Boot CD is another repair system, and it makes use of the offline NT password and registry editor function. So this is another good one that you might be interested in, Hiren's Boot CD. There are plenty of ways to hack the password, but for today's versions of Windows, you usually need to boot to some type of media in order to do that. So a live CD or Hiren's Boot CD, or also using the Windows installation disk. There's a lot of options for this. This can be prevented by disabling USB and optical booting in the BIOS. So an important troubleshooting tip for you there. It can be prevented by disabling USB and disabling your CD-ROM or DVD or Blu-ray drive in the BIOS. The problem is whenever you hack a password, quote unquote, if you use any of these methods, any encrypted data will usually be lost. Thus, it becomes imperative in some cases to actually recover the password, and we'll show that in the next sub-lesson.